Hollywood, the land of illusion. But is it illusion when people in China, the UK and Canada record on film what appears to be two suns instead of one? How can that possibly be? And then we have NASA, who has taken photographs of the sun via the SOHO satellite and redacted images that seem to be passing in front of the sun. Why is NASA doing this? What do they have to hide? Of course, we have the lunar surface, which we discussed in Watchers 2. Is that body still rotating? These are questions we explore in Watchers 3, Fingerprints of the Supernatural. It's a global phenomenon. We're in Central California, headed towards Tulare, where we're going to interview Deborah Sontag in regards to signs in the heavens. What are we looking at? What's out there? This is going to be fascinating.
What I'm seeing is alarming. It's not a small thing. We have a cosmos which seems to have been static for as long as we can look back. Having changed at least a couple times, one of them Noah's flood that we know of, historically documented, and the other through the Exodus, again was historically documented. We are going through such massive changes now to where stars are not where they're supposed to be according to astronomers. Our sun is not doing what it has always done, nor is it in its proper place. The moon, same thing. Not in its proper place, not in its proper position, its phases are off. It's puzzles that need to be looked at very carefully. Each one has their own piece. And whether we ever figure it out, only time will tell. But every bit of information that we can glean will give us a better perspective as to what the picture is.
Well, now, I've looked at a number of these things on the internet. There was one in a bus, and they were looking out the other
Right,
window.
I've seen that one, sure.
Okay, it was a double reflection coming in and bouncing off the windows on this side of the bus and going out that side. Okay, that was a non-event. There was another one looking over the horizon in the ocean, and if you talk to the locals there, they've seen this in the past. It is an atmospheric phenomenon that occurs with charged particles and dust particles over the horizon. If there were a dual sun like that, it wouldn't be an isolated vision of it. It's an optical thing that forms due to, I think, electromagnetics and dust particles and reflections. That's my opinion. I haven't seen anything yet in any of those examples that I couldn't explain through normal physics, normal reflections and artifacts.
When you have amateur astronomers, so to speak, or just observers, they'll make mistakes like shooting through a glass window. And today, if you have a double pane or triple pane, these are filled with gas. They're going to cause distortions. And so you're going to see a second sun, so is the camera. So it's not even an optic situation in the cameras. On the other hand, there is no question in my mind that these people are having authentic experiences because they are profoundly emotionally upset by it. I think a good analogy to it would be what MUFON investigators are finding when they're interviewing people. It's really difficult to cobble together data to form a convincing argument, and yet they're talking to someone who very clearly has had a profound experience.
Puts it back up. Yeah, you can definitely see it. There is something right next to the sun.
There have been many YouTube videos put up, and I believe some of them are very authentic. Unfortunately, those who are science-minded those who have the information, whether it's our science laureates or our individual governments, don't want us to know exactly what's going on. They want to keep it hidden. There are videos out there that I have researched. I have gone through countless images through the satellites. There are 9 of them that I use. And I have come to the conclusion that there are additional bodies out there. And I use that plural because there is more than one. It wouldn't surprise me if NASA was trying to block something out. They do it all the time. They redact images from the daily lineup from the satellites. They will fuzz the picture. They will change the colorations. They will tweak the contrast. Anything to throw off or smudge or smear so we cannot get a clear picture as to what's going on. I come across that all the time. I have seen many images where things have been blocked out.
There's so much intimidation and suppression right now for people spotting two suns images and reporting them, very analogous to the kind of suppression you see with people who are reporting UFO sightings.
Stan, in this footage that we're looking at here, what do you think this is?
Well, it's an object. I've looked at some of the similar shots of the earlier Core 2 images a couple years back, and there's a black circle like that goes around the back of the sun, just like this thing here, with it kind of looks like an elliptical orbit, and that is fairly convincingly the other satellite for the stereo pair, Core 1. But this one, and the edges of that black dot, that circle in that, were sharp, like somebody had taken a GIF pixelated, image and dropped it in on top of it. This, on the other hand, is it's fuzzy, which is what I would expect if it were a live thing in the image. What it is another thing, and I'll have to study this and tell you later. But the light for it being back here, for instance, my first thought is that when we see it here, it's illuminated here. But the right side of that object is illuminated from this side, and I don't see any position that could be where the sun is illuminating the back side of it. There's something else there, and if this is a truly non-doctored image, what happens is we go along here and it moves up, comes into view now right there as a dark, non-illuminated thing, because it is the light of the sun is obviously darkening it as a shadow on this side, and it goes up here like that. The date here is showing 24 and the hour is 12:18, 13:15. So we're talking about traversing all that in a couple days, which is pretty fast.
The Inuits are talking about the sun showing up 2 days early. Others are talking about the moon's phases being 2 days off. They may very well be correlated.
What we're seeing is more sun grazers. We're seeing more comets that are impacting. Keep in mind, comets that impact the sun are not cataloged. But what people who are observing the SOHO sites and other sources are telling us is that there is a very marked increase in the number of comets that are being discovered, and sun grazers and sun impactors. That would be consistent with Planet X coming into the system, because it's going to come at us pretty much like a hornet's nest, with all of the hornets flying around it.
In Watchers 2, we had a segment about the lunar surface, and we showed that the lunar surface apparently rotated about 135 degrees. How can that possibly be? And yet, YouTubers and different people from all over the world reported on that phenomenon. We then took a camera and digitally photographed the moon again and did an A-B comparison. And what we found is not much change in the lunar surface. You remember in Watchers 2, we cited the work of Dr. Lorenzo Iorio, an Italian scientist, who postulated that there was a large body the size of a planet that perhaps was coming into our solar system, which may in fact have been causing the perturbations that we see on the lunar surface. Recently, NASA has sent twin satellites known as the Grail satellite system to the lunar surface. Why are they up there now? Why does this little expenditure cost the taxpayer about $500 million? We find out that these satellites are measuring the moon's gravimetrics. The bottom line for me is this: we really don't know what's going on with the lunar surface. But is this the reason why NASA has sent up the twin satellites to monitor the situation? There is an ancient prophetic text, specifically from the book of Daniel, that describes in the last days knowledge will increase and men will run to and fro over the face of the earth.
Knowledge of God is supposed to increase to all people.
The fact that it's been concealed until this moment in history is indisputable, because up until the advent of the computer, the most you could do would be to count letters and with your finger in your hand and, you know, wet your finger and turn the page. With the advent of the computer, it suddenly made that which was not seeable, seeable.
In the Torah codes, we are dealing with some reality inside the book of Torah. We cannot pretend that we have a real full grasp of it. But using the means at our disposal, we see that it is real. It manifests time and again in various ways.
Certainly there are numbers of people who dismiss the Torah codes by saying that you can find, you know, a code in any large body of letters. Take War and Peace and run some tables and you'll get some codes revealed. And that may be true. What I've never heard happening in War and Peace is a physical manifestation that then reinforces the code. And you have, in the case of the Mumbai massacres, the Torah code which appears in a specific verse saying Mumbai, terrorists, massacre, the key words. That verse is exactly where the bullets of the terrorists went through the Torah in Chabad house in Mumbai. I don't think they found a copy of War and Peace with a bullet hole there that had the same code revealed in that chapter. And I've had the same experience of a Torah code that had my name, my rank in the Israeli army, my date of birth, my father's name, and it appeared in a verse in the Torah that was exactly the verse that a group of rabbis chose to be inscribed in a brass plaque under a picture of me.
There's something very unusual in the Torah text, something that's unexpected to have happened by chance, and it's there by design.
When we read the Bible in English, particularly the Old Testament and the Torah, the first 5 books, we are reading a condensed English version from the Hebrew. The commentaries on the Hebrew of the Torah in English done for the Jewish community contain 35 times as many words as you see in English.
A recent table on the Twin Tower attack with September 11th, massacre, twins, towers, and the most interesting feature is that all the codes came up over the plain text in the book of Exodus and fell from the people this day about 3,000 men. Interestingly, the Torah knew how many would die before the U.S. could tally the dead. Are you trying to shoehorn Torah codes over the plain text so that, let's say, keywords in the code will also appear in the plain text?
There was an experiment that was done. In fact, the experiment was published in 2004. And the probability of something like this happening by chance was extremely, extremely small.
Recent tables include Japan, earthquake, including the words atomic meltdown. This table had a probability factor of only 2.5 in 1 million. Gaddafi. In a table it relates, his presidency is fragile, will be killed. The correct Hebrew calendar year of 5772. It also states a scoundrel.
Let it be said that there are mysteries there that are just beyond human doing. You know, we can understand once they're showed to us, but to have done it,
Yeah, it's a whole different
you know,
deal.
3,000,
Sure.
4,000 years ago, I mean, no. This is magnificent stuff.
A very recent table, which we asked Professor Haralick to do on the Nephilim, states, Nephilim, sons of God, end of days. What does this mean? Are modern Nephilim walking the earth in the end of days?
Device connection.
You've discovered something which I think is absolutely startling. Tell us what that is.
Well, really, we've kind of discovered the Holy Grail here. You know, everybody's always looking for that bit of physical evidence, which is the quote-unquote smoking gun. We think we have that pretty well smoking. We've looked at some of the elements that were in the past couple of surgeries, the objects that we removed, and then there was some calculations done by one of the members of our science board for ANS research, Dr. Robert Kuntz. And Dr. Kuntz is a nuclear physicist. He was able to make some calculations based on the decay of some of the isotopes in these elements, and then configuring a mathematical constant. He compared this to the beginning of the universe, or how long elements would take to decay to that point. And with that, he was able to give us an approximate geographical figure as to where these elements come from in the universe. Are you ready for this? This was about 1/3 the way across the Milky Way galaxy.
When you took this latest implant out, there was a secretion, some sort of a substance that the implant was encased in. Am I correct to state that? Tell us about that and how we were able to finally get through this thing.
Well, the objects, as we've seen in some of the other implants that we removed, have this very tough biological shiny grayish coating. And we think it serves as an intermediary in the body, because let's face it, whether it comes from Mars or it comes from here, it's a piece of material which doesn't belong in the body. So if you have something that's in your body that doesn't belong there, there should be some kind of a rejection or inflammatory reaction to it. But in these cases, there's none. Now, we've done 16 cases, and all the reports are the same. There is no rejection and no inflammatory reaction. So let's say that this membrane, which is basically biological, separates or acts as a barrier. Now, as to what the DNA constituents of the membrane are, we don't know yet, because frankly, we haven't had the funds to do DNA studies.
On a recent appearance that you had on Coast to Coast, you discussed that you were only able to cut the implant with a laser. Could you explain that in detail, please?
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's the first time we've ever run across anything like this. At some point during the research, we have to look and see what's going on inside the metal. So in order to do that, you have to have pure, clean, metallic surfaces. So in order to do that, you have to take and you cut the object in some form or another. Well, these are usually pretty easy to do, because we can cut them with an instrument in the lab. But in this case, it wouldn't cut. Wouldn't cut at all. No matter what instrument was used, couldn't cut through it. So we said, well, we'll take it to a machine shop. So we took it to a machine shop, and prior to them trying to cut it, they took the hardest possible known file that a machine shop uses. They couldn't even put a groove in it. And then when they tried to use their power saw, which is very small, to cut the object, it wouldn't cut. So the only possible way we had of cutting it is take it to a specialized laser laboratory. And they were, after we told them what was going on and kind of the history of the object, they were almost afraid to try and cut it. So, but they did set it up on an automatic sequence, and we had to cut it with a laser. And then when you look at it through the electron microscope now, you can even see the cut lines, like a saw had gone through it, the jagged edge. So that's how hard this material is. Now, one of the tests that we've never done so far, but we'll do in the future, is called a Moore's hardness test. And I'm sure we're going to find this is a number that's pretty far out.
Harder than anything we have on the planet, you think?
Harder than anything that's known to man.
Either man-made or natural.
Right. Now we do know, now we do know that the induction of carbon nanotubes, carbon nanotechnology, is the strongest thing known to man. And we know that these objects contain carbon nanotubes. So that's perhaps the mechanism for it getting its strength.
The $64,000 question. Whoever is behind this is constructing something. They've obviously spent a lot of time, a lot of effort. I won't say money because we don't know where they exchanged that. But the amount of time, the amount of effort that has gone into this, whatever this is, and we really don't know what it is. We can only theorize. Where is this? They're constructing something. What do you think it is?
Something is happening that we're rushing towards some sort of an end. Because there's a definite climax point, and I think that this is also involved, and it's a question of, do we survive or do we not?
Never has there been a time when so many things are converging with few actual explanations, two of which are odd sounds heard in various places around the world, and also in conjunction with the quake in Washington, D.C. What is the source of these sounds? Have you ever heard anything like that before?
No, but I think we're going to be seeing and hearing a lot of very interesting things, kind of supernatural over the next few years, even this year, in the Earth's environment. There are some big changes underway.
And when you say the word supernatural, tell us what you're referring to by that.
Well, when I say supernatural, I mean above established science and what man thinks he knows. I mean, to the New Guinea natives, guys with airplanes that had propellers that landed and disgorged food for them were gods, and they thought that because their technology was superior to theirs so far, they couldn't understand anything. It was like magic. Supernatural to the natives of the cargo cult. We're the cargo cult for advanced technologies above us, in parallel universes, in other star systems, wherever you want to put it. So supernatural simply means beyond what we can empirically prove in our own knowledge at the moment.
That's a haunting sound, if we've ever heard one. One ball, no strikes. And the bunt is foul. The count is 1-1.
And what could that possibly be? Somebody shut the door.
It sounds supernatural.
A 5.8 magnitude quake hits Washington, D.C. area unexpectedly, causing a crack in the Washington Monument.
The National Park Service says engineers found cracks near the top of the monument, which is more than 550 feet tall.
We had some early reports that the Washington Monument had a few cracks or some mortar that may have come a little bit loose.
And shaking the nation's capital.
Unbelievably felt across 22 separate states.
In further study of the quake, seismic traces do not appear to be naturally occurring. A seismograph reading at Washington and Lee University seems to indicate what looks more like one massive jolt than a typical earthquake. There are no pre-shocks or visible aftershocks. Conspiracy theories abounded that an underground nuke in a subterranean military tunnel was the actual cause of the quake. Later, a large sinkhole was reported in Virginia. Are the two connected somehow? Then there have been an increase in bolides, which is a large meteor that sometimes explodes in the Earth's atmosphere. Peru recently experienced such a phenomenon, which crashed into a forest and started a raging fire. Then there's the planet Saturn, which appears to be shifting on its axis. But perhaps the most disturbing event is the unknown cause of what appears to be mass flooding in a growing number of countries in the world.
This side of the road, totally covered now. 7-Eleven still open. Don't know what they've got left. Still some street food being sold, which is awesome. And now we are going to go on our bike ride. And here we are, cycling along. I should probably get both hands on my bike before I fall in.
Thailand and Pakistan in particular may be the worst, and why the flood has been attributed to the sinking of the continent or the rising of the seafloor. Charted rain amounts for the area show an enormous increase this year. In June and July of 2011, authorities released an average of 4.5 million cubic meters of water a day from the Bhumibol Dam as the water level increased to 63% of capacity, double the amount stored in the same period a year earlier. Even so, reports from some sources say that coastal rice paddies in Vietnam have been affected by salt in the groundwater. The explanation for this has not been forthcoming. Could it be the expansion of the Earth's crust, which is causing some of what we're seeing in these countries?
There's work that's been done by W.G. Owen in London, the atlas of the continental expansion. His data, hard data, shows that the Earth at some point in time expanded from a former smaller diameter, and it was catastrophically. It wasn't like inches per year. It was suddenly like that. And the Egyptian records that Velikovsky talk about, one of the pharaohs said, "When will the Earth stop moaning and groaning?" For years it went on. During that short period of time, the Earth grew 20 to 25% of its former diameter, and it stretched the continents and spread them apart. And if you look at the United States coastline, and you look at Europe, and you try to put them together, you say, well, they don't fit together because they're arced out like that. But if you shrink the planet down 20%, they fit together perfectly, and so do all the other continents and islands that are, long-time islands. So this catastrophic change in the diameter of the planet can also be indicative of something happening inside the planet, like core shifts and magnetic field shifts. We know that the magnetic fields reverse at least every 10,000 years. It's in the clay records of fired clay and stuff. You can see the magnetic alignment of the atoms. So we know that's happened. However, tests that I've had people do in about 17 countries here recently, helping me do the test on the flow of electrons in a single vertical wire, have shown that in the last 2.5 years, that the flow of electrons, the twist it produces in the wire, has totally reversed on both the north and south hemisphere. What does this mean? We're still trying to analyze the data, but it's tied into the gravitational field. Now, some people say that our 23.5 degree tilt that we've got was the result of an asteroid that hit in the Yucatan Peninsula called Chicxulub, and that impact caused the Earth to switch over. If you do the sums backwards, that happened probably only 4,000 years ago. You look at the precession of the spin, and that's a recent event. So a lot of these things point to a catastrophic discussion of history, like Velikovsky and many others have done. The catastrophism says not gradualism, it's sudden and catastrophic.
The Inuit people who are Native Americans living in the polar regions of Alaska claim that the sun is wrong, the stars are wrong, the winds are coming from another direction, which creates snowdrifts that are in turn are in the wrong direction. These people's livelihood is directly linked to the land, and they are in tune with it. What are the Inuit trying to warn us of? Why are the Inuit people alarmed at what they are seeing? Katla, Krakatoa, Eyjafjallajökull. These are the names of just some of the volcanoes which until recently, for for the most part, have lain dormant. Now, all of a sudden, they're chorusing together. Seismic activity is going on, and this, of course, creates great concern to volcanologists and seismologists. Is it business as usual or something more? The book of Enoch, which is not part of the Christian Bible, is, however, quoted in the book of Jude. Peter quotes from it, and Paul alludes to it in his epistles. It's also found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. While we don't consider it canon, we certainly can appreciate its historicity. Listen to this passage from Enoch 80. And in the days of the sinners, the years shall be shortened, and their seed shall be tardy on their lands and fields, and all things on earth shall alter, and shall not appear in their time, and the rain shall be kept back, and the heaven shall withhold it. And in those times the fruits of the earth shall be backward, and shall not grow in their time. And the moon shall alter her order, and not appear at her time. And in those days the sun shall be seen, and he shall journey in the evening on the extremity of the great chariot in the west. And many chiefs of the stars shall transgress the order prescribed. And these shall alter their orbits and tasks, and not appear at the seasons prescribed to them. And the whole order of the stars shall be concealed from the sinners, and the thoughts of those on earth shall err concerning them. And they shall be altered from all their ways. Yes, they shall err, and take them to be gods. And evil shall be multiplied upon them, and punishment shall come upon them, so as to destroy all. This book was written thousands and thousands of years ago. Rabbi Glazerson is the author of 26 books. He's fluent in Hebrew and has studied the Midrash, the Zohar, the Talmud, of course, as well as the Torah. He has this to say about the sun.
So in Hebrew, the sun is called Chama. I don't know if you know Chama. Okay, Chama. Now in Hebrew, the same letters is like Samoach, the brain. Yeah, the brain. So some commentator says beautifully that in fact the redemption will be to people whose brain will be full of wisdom, of positive, ideas, in the right ideas. These people will be healed, but people whose brain will be, unfortunately, full of nonsense or empty things. So these people will disappear, because all the idea of the future is really to bring out the inside, of people. It means in future, all the physical will be like a shell, like a cover. And so therefore all the cover will shade away, will disappear. What will remain? The inside.
We live in the Western world where science is king. We believe only in the empirical, what we can see, touch, and handle, and reproduce in a laboratory. But is there a supernatural? Are there unseen forces that we can't track and put in a laboratory? What about the Arab Spring? We see a spontaneous eruption of millions of people in different countries rising up against their governments, which have been in place now for decades. Is there a supernatural component to that? In Syria, President Bashar al-Assad continues to slaughter his own people. The death toll now is well over 3,000 and mounting every day. There are roving bands of soldiers that sometimes go door to door, hopping over fences, knocking down doors, whatever it takes, and dragging some of the occupants of the houses out, and they are never seen or heard of again. Violence is everywhere. The rule of law is almost non-existent. In Libya, we see the end of the Arab Spring, at least this phase of it, as the dictator Muammar Gaddafi was gunned down and probably shot at point-blank range.
This is what we believe we're seeing here, a wounded Muammar Gaddafi earlier in the day, earlier this morning, in Sirte, his hometown in Libya. It looks like he's still alive in this picture, although badly wounded, and he's being taken away. There he is. I don't know if we want to freeze that shot right in the middle, but you can see Gaddafi is still alive in this video that El Arabiya has made available in Sirte. We are told that he's dead.
This brings to end years of tyranny, but begs the question, what will replace the Gaddafi regime?
We have no idea what the nature of any state on any of our borders will be, not a year from now, not even 6 months from now, but literally a month from now. We know, and not only do we not have any idea what the nature of those states will be on any of our borders, no one has any idea what the nature of those states will be, including and almost especially the current leaders of those states.
No one would have imagined the Arab Spring a year ago, yet here we are.
I think if it takes a look at the events that are taking place right now, it's a litmus test to see, can these Islamic faithful take this newfound freedom, this revolution, and stop oppressing their own people. Right. Stop with the amputation of limbs and the 16,000 acts of terrorism that have occurred since 9/11. Can they get it together, or will they just replace one oppressive regime with another one?
What revelation lies ahead on the road? What does the future hold in store?
I believe that there is evil in the world, and I believe that evil is a cancer. And if one doesn't see a supernatural evil taking place in the Middle East, I think you have to be blind, deaf and dumb.
The Telegraph reports another 28 people were killed in protests in Syria on Sunday. The total number of deaths since the uprising began in March is now over 3,500.
The wars of the Middle East in Psalm 83 and Ezekiel 38, and the destruction of Damascus in Isaiah 17.
Damascus has been cracking down on anti-government demonstrators with deadly force for months, sparking international condemnation. The protesters say they're determined to continue their rallies until President Bashar al-Assad steps down.
Israel has test-fired a ballistic missile which is capable of striking Iran. The Defense Ministry says that it was testing its missile propulsion system from its Palmachim military base. Israel has equipment widely believed to be capable of carrying nuclear warheads. The test came amid speculation that the government could be preparing a military strike against Iran's nuclear facilities.
And we head into turbulent times. The Middle East appears to be on the verge of going apocalyptic.
Well, Moscow's warned Washington against striking Iran. Russia's chief of staff revealed on Wednesday the US could attack Iran after wrapping up its campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan. He claimed his American counterpart had told him about the possibility. In an exclusive interview to RT's Spotlight program, General Nikolai Makarov outlined Moscow's concerns.
Russia is not afraid of a possible US attack on Iran. We're just trying to predict the consequences of such a move. This is an important issue for us, as Iran is located near our borders, and it worries us.
Iran with a bomb is an existential threat to Israel. I don't believe, and this is just my personal belief, that if Israel sees Iran cross a certain threshold, that they can allow that existential threat to become real. Because to do so is to commit suicide, and then really all you have left is to choose your mode of suicide.
And Ezekiel's prophecy of the dry bones coming back to
37,
life.
Ezekiel 37.
Exactly. Right? Those passages speak about, first it starts off with the bones coming up, and then around them the sinews, and then perhaps the muscles, and then the skin, and then eventually the body is whole. The more we move towards that, and the inevitable moment when this will all be over, the forces of evil are having its last fling. The last sparks are kind of firing at all costs, and eventually they will be overcome. But those little footprints in the sand, those little, and perhaps not so little ones, the even more manifest, that are coming perhaps to give a little encouragement to those who wish to see this fulfillment, and are true friends of Israel, and the Israelis themselves feel that they do have a mandate. They do have the truth, they have the morality, they have the biblical imperative to take hold of this land and never let go, and show the world what an amazing system, a great country that's a harbinger of good tidings for all of mankind. As Isaiah says in 56, "For my house will be a house of prayer for all mankind." And everyone can now settle on this holy mountain and be like one. If those nations who are at our throats really truly understood and accepted and believed that the scriptures are true and they're divine and they come from a shepherd, the shepherd of Israel, King David, or Moses himself, they would not even think of touching and harming the Jewish state.
Did rabid hatred of Jews help Nazi Germany? It destroyed it. It destroyed it. Hitler's mad. If Hitler had just said, "Hey, I'm going to institute an economic recovery of Germany like the world has never seen, and we'll be a powerhouse of a nation. And by the way, we have a lot of smart Jews here who've contributed to German culture for the last 500-600 years. We're going to use the best of their talents, and we'll see where that takes us." Can you imagine what a rosy future Germany would have had? This insane obsession with wiping out the Jewish people became the cancer that inflicted nothing but the most horrific war that Germany had ever seen upon it.
What are your views on the Hopi? And let me ask you something. How can we ascertain, how can we discern where these prophecies are coming from?
I don't know. I will say this, though, that the Hopi are probably the straightest shooters, as person to person, that I've met in my life. Among the American Indians, they are the prophecy keepers, the holy people, and they look up to them. They have an outline of things that they've gotten from somewhere in the past laid out, and they're to receive 8 messengers coming to them before the end of this age, the 4th age of man. Anyway, make a long story short, we were invited out to the Shingopa, the second Mesa, and into Augustine Moa's house, Augustine Moa Sr., an elderly man and his wife, and so his son is sitting there, and we had a laptop with us. And so I was showing him galaxies and how many million years did it take you the speed of light to travel across, million. And his son would translate and say, million. So we communicated. And then after exchanging, looking at pictures of galaxies and talking about the earthquakes coming, the volcanoes increasing and things I was explaining to him from a science point of view, the old man sat there and he went like this, and I looked around the room, and while we've been sitting there, all kinds of young people had been coming in, like adults, young adults, Indians, all lined the room and everything, and they were all very quiet. And I thought, well, that's good. We're 150 miles out in the desert. Nobody knows we're here, and we're surrounded by Indians. But I make a joke of it because they were friendly and all smiles. But the old man then started to speak, and everybody just looked at him like, wow. And he'd speak and hoping, and I'm waiting for the translation. Holly and I look at each other. Nothing's happening. And people are all going like that, looking at the chief or the medicine guy, And he turns and he points to me, and then he points over to them, and they all look at me, and they look at him. And so what's going on? This goes on for like 15, 20 minutes or so. Wow. And I'm thinking, what are they talking about? So then he stops. And I said, well, what did he say to his son? He says, oh, he's very glad you came. I said, it doesn't take 20 minutes to say that. He said, well, some of the things we can tell you, you don't have your second name, you're not a member of the tribe, so I can't tell you everything, but I will say this. We're expecting 8 messengers before the end of this age, and you were the 5th.
Wow.
And I said, well, how do you know I'm the 5th? He said, because that man's wife saw you in a dream vision, like you and I get David, she's identified you. Right. You are the one. Wow. Talk about goosebumps, you know.
Sure.
And so then, because of that, they took us both over to another place on the top of the mesa, over to the edge, where the grand medicine man, the real poobah of prophecy of the Shangopavi, lived, and he's the one he's the elder. He dealt with Washington over mineral rights and stuff, and we were standing outside waiting to talk to him, and his secretary came out, a guy, and he said, look, you can't see him right now, but come back tomorrow. Well, we couldn't because our flight reservations were different, and we had to leave. I said, you know, we were kind of interested in talking to your boss there, you know, the chief guy, about prophecy, Hopi prophecy, and what's to come. And he said, well, you don't have your second name, so I can't tell you. I said, yeah, I heard that over at the other place. I said, they brought us here, though. And so I kneeled down on one knee like this, and I picked up a piece of, you know, stick or something that was laying in the sand between us, and we're standing, you know, just a couple feet apart. And so we're talking, I'm looking up at him, and I'm doodling here in the sand, and I'm drawing this little spiral doodle, you know, like you'd draw on a piece of paper, you know, da, da, da. And he looked down at that, and he says, oh, yeah. And I stood up then, and he said, well, that's interesting, and he didn't say why. And Holly's standing over here, and this dirt devil starts up immediately, spinning just like that spiral thing was on. And it comes right over and sits right on top of Robert and I, the Indian fellow and I, right on top of us. So we're in between, and there's sticks and dirt flying in our eyes, and neither one of us wanted to be the first to blink and get out of it. And you know, I'm thinking, why does that dust devil sit right on us? That's just very... And I looked down, I saw that spiral that I'd drawn, I put my boot down there, and I wiped it out. And I promise you, as sure as I stand here, as soon as I wiped it out, that fraction of a second, dust devil disappeared. And the dust settled around us. And he looked at me in the eye and he said, however, there are a few things I can tell you now. And he did. Wow. And part of what he said was this. He took me to the edge of the mesa there, looking over into the valley below, which is a good drop. And he said, you see that down there? At the end of this age, coming soon, there will be water flowing between these mesas, and we will go between them by boat. And at that same time, there will be a terrible civil war in the United States, all kinds of groups fighting each other. And the Bahana, you know, the non-Hopi, you out there will fight and kill each other, and you will be invaded from the east, and it will destroy your country. Yet there will be a small portion of it left, and there will be bands of you who will survive, and you will come to us, and we will join together to form a new tribe of man. And we weep now because we know that it will be difficult. There will be fighting amongst us as we come to this new culture, both tribes of man and Indian having to form and merge. And we will move from here, and we'll go north up into the Four Corners, into Colorado. And that time is coming soon.
Fascinating.
For water to flow between the mesas, it would have to be 5,200 feet higher than it is now. Now, I don't think the sea is going to rise that level, but I do think it's going to shift,
yeah,
and
right.
It's going to drop down into the ocean,
yeah.
And they will have water come up like that. Anyway, that's enough. That's enough of the prophecies. There's quite a few things, but anyway, good times are not ahead.
Right.
And they will join with what's left of the American population and form a new peaceful tribe up in this region, very close to what George Washington's dream vision was about, into the center of the country. And when we're all being attacked and they thought it's all over, an angel will spread the clouds and run off all the bad dudes, and there will be a new seed here of man. And there will be people in human bodies inhabiting the planet for the millennium at least.
Mm-hmm. Has to be, for 1,000 years,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
driving through the remarkable Garden of the Gods, which is, maybe about 40 minutes away from Barry Schwartz and about 20 minutes from our hotel. We were staying in Colorado Springs. And as you can see, the boulders, the rocks are just astounding, just amazing. We're about 9,000 feet above sea level, and both Richard and I are definitely feeling the altitude, so much so that when we stopped to get a little quick bite to eat, we got out of the car and we stood up and felt woozy. We're pumping water at this altitude, lots of it, to try to avoid altitude sickness. We're on our way to see Barry Schwartz, who's the Stirp photographer. The Stirp team is the team that went over to Turin, Italy in 1978 and examined the enigmatic artifact known as the Shroud of Turin for about 5 to 7 days, 24/7. Very interesting to talk to Barry. Meanwhile, we are in, when John Denver writes the song Rocky Mountain High, it's amazing. The countryside is just breathtaking. Wow. Unbelievable. There he is.
Some people. The Oxford Lab received a £1 million anonymous contribution. Did I mention that?
That's one of the questions right there.
Yeah, and that's a matter of
Hear
public
that?
record.
Hear that?
Mm-hmm. And so what's amazing to me about that is that the real question becomes, when did they know that was coming?
Bingo. Wow.
When did they know
Yeah.
that was coming?
Yeah.
Did they not know about it in advance?
Right.
That's possible. But if they knew about it in advance, how much influence might that have had? Because they got it for debunking the shroud. That's what it was for.
That's what it was for. Sure.
So if they knew in advance, then that's a huge piece of evidence that shows that there was...
You feel comfortable, camera?
Hell yes.
What does the Shroud of Turin, what does the cloth look like up close?
You know, one of the questions I get asked a lot is, well, what does it look like when you're up there and close to it? And I'll tell you something. You know, my first impressions was, this is in way too good a condition to be this old. That was my first impression. And people, skeptics particularly, have said, well, there you go. There's proof that it's not that old. And then I thought about it and I realized, why don't we have this mentioned in the Gospels, except maybe in 1 or 2 places, but not with an image on it or anything else? Well, you've got to remember, first of all, this had blood on it. Jewish law forbids that, leaving the grave or even touching it, okay? Now, imagine now if it's not only got blood, but an image as well. You couldn't say that. You couldn't step out and say, look, because there were iconoclasts that would want to destroy it. Not only that, you'd be punished for taking this cloth that's supposed to be in a grave and handling it and taking it out of the tomb and with an image on it. So they had to keep it a secret. I mean, they might have been the next one on the cross if they came running out of the tomb going, look what we found. I don't think that was going to happen. And one man said to me, Mr. Schwartz, does this image violate the second commandment? So now I'm standing there, second commandment. So I thought about it for a moment and I said, well, sir, I said, our team did the most in-depth scientific study and we were able to determine that it's neither a painting nor a photograph nor applied by the hand of a man. So, to answer your question, if it's none of those things, okay, and it wasn't applied by the hand of a man, then it was a naturally occurring or supernaturally occurring image. Perhaps God did it. I said, so in that case, since it wasn't done by the hand of a man, then God did the image and it consequently could not violate any of his commandments, could it? And he looked at me and he said, oh, well, that's a brilliant answer. And then his friend speaks up and says, do you know who this man is? And I said, have no idea. This is the Anglican Archbishop of Wellington, New Zealand. So now I'm embarrassed. Here I am, a Jew, lecturing an archbishop on theology, and I start to apologize. He goes, no, I'm writing it down. He says, that's a brilliant answer. We'd been talking about where the wound in the hands is, and unlike all the art that has been done, you can see here that the exit wound is actually here at the back of the wrist. The Romans would start by driving the nail here in the thinner furrow between these two kind of fleshy parts of your palm. So it's still in the palm, but it's further up in the palm, and they usually came in at an angle, making it harder to tear it out. And the exit wound would be about right here, and if you look right here, that's where we have the exit wound on the shroud. So, and of course you can see these are the original patches, very distinctly noticeable as patches, and not as, you know, sewn in to be invisible, but to be very visible.
And where are the L-shaped?
The L-shaped burn holes, let's see if we can find, on this half of the shroud are the smaller ones, and there's one and there's the other. This is the 4th level and this is the 3rd level. If you were to look at the dorsal view, you would see them more distinctly, and I can show that to you on that replica over there. You can see
Scourging marks are just...
and you'll notice scourge marks on his chest, on his arms, on his legs, not just the back, but if you're whipping somebody and they come around, yeah, they come around and hit you in the front too. So you have all these things that, you know, there's no way some medieval artist could have even thought of these things, let alone create an image without painter or photographic emulsion.
We're here with Dame Isabel Picsack in her amazing studio, which is, it has a sense of reverence to it that is overwhelming when both Richard and I walk in. It's a pleasure to be here, an honor to be here. Why do you think the Shroud of Turin is not a painting?
It cannot even be denied. The shroud cannot be a painting because it breaks almost every rule of nature. And when natural law is broken, that's it. And let me tell you why. Everybody, every layman thinks that a painting is paint particles on some surface. No. It is paint particles tied together by some kind of liquid, and that goes on the surface, and as long as that liquid is completely continuous, you see a continuous image, and that is a painting. The minute the liquid is hurt, missing, parts of it missing, or entirely missing, it cannot be a painting because it is against natural law. So as long as you see a continuous image, you have to have an absolutely intact, continuous paint film. And that's the very important thing, the liquids which carry a painting. The shroud has an absolutely continuous image. There is no interruption, and there is not one bit of liquid tying material on it. This is a nonsense. Nobody can paint like that. Such a painting does not exist. It cannot exist.
What got you interested in the shroud? How did you, I mean, I'm looking around the studio, and I would call this sacred art, for lack of a better.
It's sacred art.
It's sacred art. And it's, like I said earlier, when you walk in the door, you just feel I don't know where they use the word supernatural peace, but you feel a supernatural peace when you walk into what I would call a modern day sanctuary. It is in essence, a church, a place of assembly. There is a sacredness here. What got you involved in the shroud? When did you first view it, and what piqued your interest?
Well, believe it or not, at the age of 2, I already was doing drawings. At the age of 11, I won national first prize with my painting. At the age of 14, I painted in the Vatican. So my career came so early, and I would say that from the age of 6 or so, I really almost was drawn to this shroud. I really felt that this is extremely important, not only from the religious point of view, but from the scientific point of view, because some new kind of science opens through this shroud.
One of the most noted skeptics, I won't mention his name, but people will know who I'm talking about, once told me that, all that work of the Stirrup team is the rantings of believers. It's very simple if you don't understand the science, that past a certain point, somebody throwing the science at you, you stop and you're not qualified to challenge the science, so you attack the scientist. And that's this particular skeptic's normal technique. And he always then throws the religious card out. But he can't do that with me because I'm Jewish. Okay, if I have an instrument, say a spectrophotometer, I'm taking a reading off of a piece of cloth. When I push the button to take that reading on the instrument, do you think that instrument cares whether I'm a Christian, a Jew, or a Muslim? Or a heathen? It doesn't care. The data is the data. So if you don't like what Stirrup's conclusions were, go to the peer-reviewed science, study the data, come up with your own conclusions, but it's there. And nobody else has done that but us.
The Sudarium of Oviedo was a cloth that has blood on it that is preserved in Oviedo, Spain from the 7th century. When overlaid with the shroud, apparently we see that there are points of congruency.
Well, the Sudarium is, it not only has blood, but has other fluid stains, probably from the nose and mouth of the victim that the cloth wrapped. There's little doubt that it was a face cloth, the kind of cloth that would have been wrapped around the face of the man of the shroud, assuming that it was him. And to this day, our custom is pretty much everywhere in the world, if somebody dies, say an accident victim, the first thing you do is cover the face. So the same thing would have been true even in the 1st century, that out of respect for the dead, you cover the face. The interesting thing about the Sudarium is it does have provenance back to about 7th century. It also has these blood and fluid stains that when compared to some of the blood stains, particularly those of the back of the head on the shroud, there does seem to be a very kind of congruency that does exist. I don't know about the number of points, and I don't know that using a technique usually applied to fingerprints is appropriate for image analysis.
You mentioned on my radio show that a £1 million donation was given. Tell us about that.
I guess the real irony of the whole carbon dating business, since we're talking about it, is the fact that after the 3 laboratories ultimately did their testing, published their results in Nature, a radiocarbon article, Oxford Laboratory received a £1 million, British pound sterling, anonymous contribution for debunking the shroud. Interestingly enough, Dr. Tite, who was from the British Museum, left the British Museum, came to Oxford, and some of that money built him a nice lab at Oxford. And look, if the order of events is as I've stated them, and that happened after the fact, then okay, well, so be it. But when did these 3 labs find out that this contribution was coming? Did they have any foreknowledge or forewarning that this was the case, or was it a big surprise to them that came 2 months after the dating was released? Now, of course, if they didn't know about it, no harm, no foul. But if they knew about it, if they knew this contribution was going to come, depending on what they found about the shroud, had to be for debunking the shroud, then I question the entire process.
Everybody looks at the 2 images like this, for instance. 2 separate images which have nothing to do with each other, it seems like. And nobody thinks of it that they were on both sides of the shroud and they were wrapped around a figure. So they were not flat, they were wrapped around. So what does that mean? You look at it, why is it so separate? Why one would not influence the other?
The other, right.
And then you realize suddenly, heaven's sakes, we never noticed it, that there is a horizontal object which we never noticed before, going through, which slices the shroud body into 2 halves. One has nothing to do with the other. What is the single phenomenon which can cause that? We are dealing with 2 event horizons. And we are already a little bit familiar with event horizons, only they are a little bit different than the Schrod's event horizon. The event horizon is an object which, when you approach, it cuts space-time into two halves. One you can know up to a point which you are approaching from your side. But there will be a point when you cannot know anything anymore what is behind it. The last photon would hit it, the last time quanta will hit it. And after that, nothing.
For all practical purposes, time and space have stopped. Is that correct?
We are very close to it, and I will explain that.
Okay.
This too is.
So the body laid like this in the tomb.
Yes.
Just like we see it on the shroud.
Yes, yes.
But suddenly, at the event, it began to levitate.
Yes, the gravity was defeated, the second law. Then time and space stops. And there is a total, for the first time in the history of the universe, there is a total time collapse. And even nature, the scriptures kind of hint at it, that strange things were happening. That was the moment when time stopped. When time stops, the very last information it had, it would project on the event horizon on both sides. And when finally we have no event horizon, it releases its secret, that there was a Big Bang type singularity. There is an explosion which cannot be described. The universe would have stopped existing if somehow it would not have been cut to a very, very minimum of time. And that's why we see on the shroud an unknown thing which looks like burn, but it's not.
In 2002, a clandestine, is the only word I can use, restoration was done without consulting any scientists. Just a small group in Turin took it upon themselves, although I must admit they got Pope John Paul II's permission. But I'm not too sure that by then John Paul knew what he was signing, or even if he signed it, or perhaps the Secretary of State might have signed it. So it was done ostensibly with his permission. And they removed all the patches, and they removed the backing cloth, and they scraped all the burned stuff away, and they vacuumed it, and they used steam in areas to get some of the creases out. And it's now 7 centimeters longer. And they virtually eliminated the possibility for a lot of science.
We've just discussed people all over the globe looking up and seeing what appears to be 2 suns in the sky. Then we have Dr. Roger Leir. Why is it that he has to take an alien implant to a laboratory, and only then can they open this thing up, and then with a laser beam? What's going on here? Why is it that there seems to be a hidden code within the Torah? Why is that there? And why only now in the modern age have we really been able to discover it? What supernatural trigger may have been responsible for the Arab Spring? Then we have the Shroud of Turin, this enigmatic cloth, which has literally remained hidden from us until the modern age. With all this happening on the globe, day after day, it seems to be accelerating. And it begs the question, what's going to come next?
I got some chips for you.
It's just awesome. Look at the way they walk.
Actually, there's actually one lying down right. These are her twins, I'm sure. Good stuff, huh? I know you like those punches. I know you like those punches.
Look at her face.
Yeah, you do.
That's just great.
And for the first time the other day, she let her two babies come up. She has twins.
Really?
A little boy and a little girl. And she actually let them come up and get some chips.
Don't disturb her.